2008, 2008, 2008, however you like to say it, Peugeot now has a fully electric version of its small SUV. The e-2008, as its maker likes to call it, is a bit of a landmark because it is the first electric passenger car for Peugeot in Australia. It follows in the tyre tracks of the recently launched e-Partner delivery van and comes in one sole variant, a high-spec GT. And it sits alongside three other internal combustion 2008s in the base Allure, the regular GT and the high-spec GT Sport. Now the E2008 is so fresh that it literally launched yesterday at a price of $59,990 before on-roads. And that's a fair $9,000 step up from the ultimate GT Sport internal combustion version. At a tenner under 60 grand, the new French electric SUV undercuts the likes of Tesla Model 3 and Model Y, as well as the Polestar 2. That said, it's a fair bit more expensive than price busters such as the BYD Atto 3 and the MG4, and is priced exactly the same as the Cupra Born. So first up, some stats. Chasing cars. Honest reviews of your next car.
Brought to you by
Budget Direct.
So it's powered by a single electric motor outputting 100 kilowatts and 260 newton meters, which is a bit up on the 96 kilowatts of most of the 1.2 litre 3-pot petrol range, but it's a bit short of the flagship 114 kilowatts of the GT Sport. In terms of electric output, it's really no powerhouse, and with a claim of 9 seconds 0 to 100, it's also no rocket ship, but we're going to test that a little bit later. Interestingly, top speed is only 150 kilometers an hour, although that's going to be plenty for most Aussie buyers. And then there's the all-important topic of range. The claim here is 328 kilometers WLTP, which is a fair bit down of the Cupra Born's 500 kilometer range. That's because at 50 kilowatt hour gross, or around 46 to 47 kilowatt hour usable, it doesn't fit a terribly large battery. A 10 to 80% battery charge is said to take around about half an hour on 100 kilowatt DC fast charging. At home on an 11 kilowatt wall box, you're looking at around about 5 hours. However, if you're thinking about plugging it into a 10 amp household outlet, you really are looking at up to 24 hours of charging. So the E2008 is clearly no pillar of EV performance or range. However, it is pretty clear that it is positioning itself as a bit of a short-range urban runabout rather than a grand tourer. There certainly seems to be the pitch when it comes to size and styling. So you get the triple claw headlights and long driving lights, as well as the signature wedge-shaped profile, together with a lot of plastic cladding, which does make it appear to ride higher than it actually does. It's quite a sharp looker, and you do get some nice details, such as this garnish that sort of threads into the wing mirrors with a little E symbol, and you get large 18-inch wheels. Apart from some body colour coding in the grille and some E-badging, it really is a dead ringer for the petrol version, and for my taste, that's not such a bad thing. So far, so flamboyantly familiar, so let's check out the cabin. Much like the exterior, the electric version's cabin space is largely indistinguishable from the petrol GT Sport. It's a familiar theme with that familiar funkiness, a familiar mid-grey sort of effect, and this familiar fake plastic carbon fibre. And while this cabin does present quite well and does feel quite upmarket for some of the more affordable versions, it does feel about right for the 60 grand pitch. Now, critics have whinged about the wheel and instrument placement since Peugeot first lobbed with it eons ago, and we're not about to stop here. The 3D hologram digital instrumentation gets 6 different skins that you can look at, and I could tell you what they do look like if I could actually see them through the steering wheel rim. The wheel still blocks the view of the instrumentation at anywhere other than dropping the steering wheel right in your lap, which is completely daft. The strange egg-shaped wheel is also comically small, which Peugeot says means that it gives you a smaller distance with which to turn, although that does mean inherently you get less control. The alcantara and leather trim seats do look good and are fundamentally comfy. However, there is a palpable lack of under-thigh support and you can't adjust the base height. Add the fact that the pedals are a little too proud of the footwell, and inside it's a bit of an ergonomic dog's breakfast. Now, the presentation down the center stack is actually quite interesting, although all of this button array here is not terribly intuitive to use, and you do get plenty of this sort of piano black, which does tend to get a lot of smudges and get scratched up pretty easily. And then there's a 10-inch touchscreen multimedia system, which is really no pillar of greatness when it comes to graphics, speed and usability. So smartphone connectivity is wired, there's no inductive charge points. The sat-nav system is pretty grady and rudimentary, and the reversing camera is very small and fisheye. It really is not the kind of system that you would expect in a car that costs $60,000, electric or not. Then there's the clumsy HVAC control, where you have to actually hit a physical button to bring up the screen and then go into the touchscreen to adjust the settings. It's all a bit fussy and inaccessible for its own sake, so let's check out the second row and see if the theme continues in there. Now the room in the back here is a little cozy and it feels kind of claustrophobic, although there is a bit of a sort of concave effect into the ceiling, which gives you a bit of added headroom. Part of the claustrophobic effect is that the sunroof doesn't really extend through all the way to the second row. And there are lots of dark plastics here, which sort of makes it really feel a bit like a cave. Once you get in, the seats are actually reasonably comfy and you do get a couple of USB ports, although the lack of air vents does suggest that this car is better suited to couples than it is families. Ownership wise, it comes with 5 years of unlimited kilometre warranty with 8 years and 160,000 kilometres of coverage on the battery. Servicing is pretty enticing with 3 years costing $600 up front and 5 years for $1,000, and the intervals are a long 25,000 kilometres between visits. The advantage of having such a small battery and it's located under the car is that there's no compromise in boot space, so it's 434 litres just like the petrol version, though you do get a little baggie for your charge cables. A nice trick though is that there is a little hidden cubby under here where you can actually stow the cables out of the way of the luggage. However, there is no spare wheel. Now the EV powertrain hardware does add about a quarter tonne to the weighbridge ticket, though the 2008 is a pretty lightweight vehicle to begin with, so what we end up with is 1,548 kilos. So while it's definitely no powerhouse, that lightweight means that it does get along quite nicely and it is quite light on its rubber feet. So it feels nice on the curves, and the steering is quite light and engaging, and it makes for a fine ally punning around the urban jungle. The ride too isn't too bad, although it can get a little bit pitchy when you do hit sharp edges or drop a wheel in a pothole. But probably the biggest improvement when it comes to the EV is in powertrain behaviour. For its pint-sized charm, I've never really been a fan of the 1.2 litre 3-cylinder engine that is offered in the internal combustion versions. It really is quite peaky in the mid-range and doesn't have much energy either side, and it isn't mated terribly well with the 6-speed automatic transmission. However, here you get thick, progressive electric torque, and it's transmitted through a 1-speed transmission. And it certainly has all those pleasing characteristics that many people are really starting to like about electric cars. And how the EV format really smooths out some of those gremlins of the petrol version really is worth a big chunk of that $9,000 premium. Now I've mostly left it in normal mode, which gives it enough pep but also allows pretty decent efficiency and range. Using our regular EV range testing road loop, the Peugeot returned a calculated maximum range of 284 kilometres, which is somewhat short of the 328 kilometre advertised claim. Real world consumption was 16.3 kilowatt hours, a figure that proved consistent throughout our week-long test of the car. That's pretty decent, although that sort of efficiency should be expected from EV drive this modest. So while it doesn't have that real crackerjack style performance that many people have come to expect from EVs, this vehicle does have ample enough shove to make for a pretty satisfying around town runabout. It's fair to say that the e-2008 is Peugeot easing rather than diving into the electric passenger car waters. It's built off familiar petrol car underpinnings and maintains the hallmarks that some love and some hate about the regular 2008. However, the significant $16.5 walk up from the regular GT petrol version might be a step too high for some EV curious buyers. And frankly, its electro credentials are a bit tame compared to what else $60,000 can buy you out there in EV land. However, it's more than decent and downright likeable, especially through the lens of an EV urban runabout that's not accustomed to longer trips. And it would make a fine second car for those who want a bit of French flair but don't want too much of that EV wackiness. Further, the EV powertrain does make a big improvement over the petrol alternative when it does come to drivability. And because it's not terribly heavy for an EV, it's also got a nice lithe, sporty vibe. And it does make a welcome alternative to the usual suspects on the EV landscape, given that the likes of Toyota and Mazda are still getting their EV business in order. That's what I think, but how about you? Put your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe while you're at it. And as always, thanks for watching Chasing Cars.